So welcome to planning for and conducting focus groups. And I want to address the two elements there. The planning for, as in, how do we set everything up? How do we make sure we've got that right to start with? And then the conducting, which is actually making it happen and getting the benefit out of the session in respect to focus groups. Now, for a lot of us, there is a huge overlap between the practice or a lot of elements of practice of conducting qualitative personal interviews and conducting focus groups. So you'll see some overlap, but you'll also see that focus groups have something that is unique. In terms of the things that we have to think through and the logistics that we might have to deal with. There are four objectives for tonight's discussion. And the first one is to understand the ethics of focus group research, both before, during, and after. Now, at the heart of all good research is ethics. And this is not only what you tell your university that you're doing and get signed off on the paper from the review boards, but it's also your ongoing behavior, your ongoing interaction throughout and after the process as well. We want to understand the principles of structuring focus groups for research. Now, I've kind of called them two things. I called them focus group interviews and focus group discussions because at the end of the day, they are both. They start off as an interview, but they morph, they grow into a discussion. So I kind of use the words interchangeably, but interviews always feel very one-sided. Question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. Whereas a focus group has a little bit more of um, almost like a snowball effect. It's a little bit more organic as different participants contribute more to it. I want to understand best practice roles and activities for the moderator, and this one is very important. What is your role in conducting the focus group, and how do you, or others that you engage with, how do you actually make the focus group successful? Partly through your personality, because that's a key thing for us, but also through how you set things up. And the final objective is how to design the questions and the discussion flow for maximum usable output. And you'll see I've used that almost horrible term, maximum usable output. I feel like it's a factory, right? But the idea is, look, in order for you to be successful at your research, you've got to have data. What data do you need? How much data do you need? And then you work back because you've got to ask the right questions. You've got to push the conversation in the right direction to actually achieve that and to make it happen. So for me, we design questions based on what we need from the end of the session, and we design a discussion flow. Even though we might say, you know what, discussions take off on their own, which yes, they do, but you've still got to have a goal. You've still got to have a set of needs. And with that, if you find that your discussion isn't giving you that, you've also got to have a backup plan so that you can make sure you're getting the output that you need. I want to start with ethics. Usually I leave ethics to the absolute end, but for today, I wanted to start with ethics because ethics is at the heart. Now, the ethical principles that we talk about here are pretty common, but it's a point for reminder, and it's also a point about how you can make sure that you are acting and conducting yourself in a way that's not going to be detrimental to your research. So we start with informed consent. All participants must understand the purpose of the research, etc., etc. That's a minimum. Confidentiality and privacy. So participants' identities, responses are kept confidential. Even in the focus group itself, people may choose not to use their own names. They might want to use a pseudonym. So instead of being Craig, I'm going to be Smith, for example. And in the focus group, so that each other can't identify themselves, that might be the choice. It might also be record keeping for you, but it may be their own personal willingness to contribute, but based on not everybody needs to know my real name. So have a mindset about how you want to do that. Obviously, the nature of the research, the nature of the discussion that you will be facilitating will help determine that. But it's also something that you can offer. You can do a focus group and you can say, hey, Craig, you have the choice of using your real name or you have the choice of using a pseudonym. So during that experience, I can choose, do I want to use Craig or do I want to use Smith? It's also about discussing the ground rules for group sharing. So what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas type of thing. Whatever we say within the group doesn't go outside of the group. Now, that's actually called Chatham House rules. A lot of organizations use that for retreats and other discussions, that it just stays within the members. That's a pretty common type of guideline that you may want to have. The most important one is number 3, minimizing harm. This is about avoiding sensitive topics that could distress participants unless necessary. Now, here's the key thing. The unless necessary is what's necessary, because some of us will have topics that, of course, cause distress. For example, maybe I am doing, or maybe I'm conducting research on sexual abuse during childhood. And obviously, the purpose of my study, I'm going to have to lead the discussion to some sensitive areas. That's okay. But what we don't want to do is have, say, for example, a discussion on marketing practices. And suddenly the topic veers off to American politics and your support or lack of support for Trump. Now that becomes something that can cause distress for participants. So the idea is stick to your topic, making sure people know in advance, and not really going beyond that, because if you push people on topics that they are uncomfortable about and not prepared for, then you run the risk that they will walk out of your focus group. And that is something you don't want, because first of all, you've lost a data source. Secondly, if somebody leaves your focus group, that actually changes the dynamic with the rest of the people who are left. And that may also change their willingness to contribute to the conversation that you're having. We want to focus, another ethics issue, we want to focus on voluntary participation and incentives. And I've got a slide on incentives in a minute. Incentives are actually okay. Incentives are you giving people something for their participation. Now, I personally would like you to give me $100 every time I come to your focus group, but I'm probably more likely to get a Starbucks voucher or something like that. But there are a range of different incentives that we can use. Number 5 is respect and cultural sensitivity. Now, this one isn't your usual ethics discussion, but it is very important and it is related. We have to be aware of the diversity within the group, and the diversity might be gender, it may be culture, it may be background, it may be sexuality, it may be a number of different things. Okay, it could be religious belief and so forth. We, as the moderator, as the researcher, we have to create a focus group experience that respects the diversity, that accommodates the diversity, and doesn't put somebody at harm's way or doesn't make somebody feel uncomfortable because of either the questions or the discussion that happens, or moreover, not just the questions itself and the talking points you want, it's also other people's responses to those talking points, making different people feel uncomfortable. So you've got to focus on ensuring that you use inclusive language, that all voices can be heard, which means everyone in the focus group has the opportunity to speak. Not everyone in the focus group is going to speak the same amount. You know, you can run a focus group, 6 people, for example, 2 people may be relatively silent during it. They just might add a few words here and there. They may not participate actively. That's normal, but they've still got to feel safe enough that that's how they want to contribute. So if they're shy or introverted people, that, you're still giving them a chance that they can say what they want at the time that is comfortable for them without feeling like the other people in the focus group are talking over them or shutting them down. The final major ethics consideration is institutional ethics approval. And this is your ethics committee or your internal review board processes. Even if you're not going very deep, you have to get ethics approval from your university because you're working with people. And the ethics process, the approval process, shows that you understand the formalities of research, the procedural sides of research. So if you are doing a focus group in your final dissertation, I expect to see a small section, usually in chapter 3 on research methodology, but I expect to see a small section, might only be 1 or 2 paragraphs, could be a little bit more, okay, but I expect to see a small section on ethics and ethics approval. So the ethics are, that you had an informed consent statement, that you're maintaining records in privacy for 2 years in your university office, and the date of ethics approval from your university, and of course, whatever case number they relate to that. Now, although I sort of talk about ethics as kind of flat, I want to emphasize the fact that ethical practice is ongoing. So it's from recruitment through to reporting. So from the moment we decide I want to do focus group and I've found the types of people I want and I go out to find them, right through to when I publish my PhD thesis, dissertation, all along there are ethics considerations. So we have to keep that in mind. It's not just about the informed consent and minimizing harm. As you are writing up, as you are doing your data analysis and you're forming conclusions, how you treat the voices of other people. That also fits into ethical practice. Being respectful of their voice, allowing them their voice in their natural way, i.e., through the citations or the quotations, I should say, that you will be using from the focus group. All of that fits or sits under the concept of ethics. Now, I want to jump into incentives for a minute. And this is because some people always say, oh, it's wrong to pay people or it's wrong to incentivize. Reality is we all want to be incentivized to do something. And in a focus group research scenario, incentivization is perfectly fine. But understand that it means different things to different people. Sometimes we want money. So, yes, you can pay people to participate in your focus group. That's brilliant. If you're rich, pay them well. But not everybody seeks money, okay? Not everybody participates in a focus group because you're paying. If you are paying, it's usually just a token for the period of time. So depending on the society that you live in. So where I live in Malaysia, for example, 50 ringgit is a very generous amount for 1 to 2 hours of somebody's time as a token of appreciation. The problem is money feels very transactional. It feels very arm's length. It feels very impersonal. So you have to decide on a deeper understanding of the relationship that you as the researcher have with the respondent, the people who are contributing to the research that you're doing. I like the idea of giving food. I think, we'll put on a lunch. Now, that kind of creates extra challenges for you because it's easy to go to an ATM machine and take out cash. It's harder to arrange a caterer for, 8 people and make sure there's food for everybody because, some people have a halal diet. I don't eat fish. I don't eat certain vegetables. Some people are vegetarian. Logistically, that's a nightmare. But it's also an attraction for some people. They feel like, ah, that's nice. They're giving us, they're providing us a lunch after the focus group where we get to talk a little bit more, especially if they want the social elements of it. We can give gifts. That one, be very cautious. I actually went to an academic event. Now, it wasn't particularly a focus group per se, but it was actually an advisory board, which is basically a very formal focus group for universities to get industry feedback. And we got a gift, which I thought was absolutely sweet until I opened it up and it was a Tupperware container. I was disappointed. I would have preferred my $50, thank you, because at the end of the day, the gift was crap. So if you're giving gifts, don't just sort of give out some sort of junk or useless stuff. Give something that is useful. So notebooks, pen drives, I know they're typical, but they're affordable and they have a use with the people who you're passing them to. Some people have non, um, what's the word? Non-monetary or non-object based incentives. So some people just like the fact that they got a great invitation, that it seemed positive, that it was upbeat, it interested them, it gelled with what they wanted. And that's enough for some people. Some people like the idea of being able to share their opinions on a topic with others. So if ever you want to do a focus group on the future of education, call me. I'm into it because I like to talk about that. So, for that reason, I'm not interested in the money. I'm interested in the fact that somebody wants to hear my opinions, my thoughts on something, and I'll contribute because of that. Sometimes it is about having an enjoyable, a convenient, and easy to find meeting location. Now, that could be online, which like we're doing now, but a lot of focus groups, the better focus groups are within a face-to-face physical environment. Now, to do that, it's got to be accessible. People might want to go to a new building. So, for example, where I live, there's a couple of brand new shopping malls with new cafes and so forth. For me, if you offer me to do a focus group in one of the brand new buildings in the city that not many people have gone into, or it's at a unique public park or something, that's an attraction. I'm going to want to go for the environment. Now, again, that's an incentive for me. Different people will react different ways, but make sure that it's easy to find. If you have to pay parking, no way. So, as an example, if I did a focus group where my office is, and my office is based within a hotel complex, if I did a focus group here and you drive here, the car parking is super expensive commercial rates. That's not going to be attractive to you. So it's not convenient. It's also perhaps in a location that maybe is harder to get to than some of the other options that I have. So think about those issues. Um, some people are incentivized by being able to contribute to what they consider an important research project. So by telling more about the research that you are doing, by sharing with people how their voice, how their stories, how their opinions can help with the development and the understanding of a particular topic, that is actually an incentivization for many. For others, they simply want to build on, and build community, social, or personal relationships. I know of people who volunteer for marketing-based focus groups. One, because they get free food. Two, because they get to meet people, and this is a social experience for them. And that is the incentive. So again, think about your topic. Think about your research. Think about what you're going to ask. Think about who you're going to ask to be there. Perhaps the incentivization that you can offer is not financial or product, but it's social, it's networking. And that can be more than enough for contributors. And finally, some people are simply interested in the research summary or an infographic. So I know I have volunteered for focus groups before, to participate in focus groups before, because I'm interested in the research, but actually I want to see the results of the research. I don't want to wait until your doctorate got published in journal articles, but I kind of want that nice little summary, or I want those insights that you can give me personally from that, because that has applications for something else I'm doing, whether it be within academia or whether it be within business. So just understand your audience, what they want, what's going to work for them, and choose an incentivization strategy that works. Quite often we might say, look, you give an either or option. Uh, you can have um, a Starbucks voucher for $50, or I can donate $50 to the charity of your choice. That's perfectly fine. You do not have to have the same incentive for every individual, but you can't not offer one individual an incentive and not offer, sorry, you can't offer one individual an incentive and then not offer it for a different individual. So you have, if you're going to go incentives, you offer it to everybody, but maybe you offer them a range of opportunities as to what they want and talk to them first about what works for them in that respect. Now, I want to move on to the first of two parts. So I want to focus on the characteristics of focus groups before I move on to the execution of focus groups. So in characteristics, I'm going to look at a number of different things that make a success or make for a successful focus group. And this is really planning. Okay, this is what do I have to do in advance in terms of reaching out to people, in terms of setting up the focus group space or the discussion space, so that I'm going to get good data. And remember, my whole goal of this is great quality data. So I want to create an environment. I want to create a process that works smoothly and helps me achieve that goal. First of all, I have to think about my participants. Obviously, they're going to be carefully recruited. We want to make sure that our participants have knowledge about what we're going to be talking to them about. The other day, a friend of mine asked me, hey, I'm doing a focus group this week, and I'm specifically talking to parents of children who are between 8 and 15 years old who consume snack foods. And that was the parents consuming the snack foods, as far as I understood, but now it might be the kids. But he was very defined in who his target group was. He wanted female parents, so the mother. He wanted to make sure they had at least one child currently aged between, I think, 8 and 15. So carefully recruiting is making sure that your participants meet your goal. Now, I give us an example. I'm not a parent. I'm not female. So I turn up to his focus group. I'm going to be useless. So in order to make sure you actually, as you're doing your recruitment phase, you want to make sure you have a couple of filter questions in there. So in his case, it would be, are you female? Yes, I am. Do you have a child between 8 and 15 years old? Yes, I am. Oh, yes, I do. So in respect of that, then those people who ticked yes to both of those boxes, those people are certainly going to be the appropriate target audience. If you're bringing me into that focus group, I can't contribute anything. I know nothing about being a parent. I have zero interest in what kids eat. And snack food for me is a chocolate bar and perhaps a glass of wine. I don't think that aligns with what he had in mind. So you have the responsibility to select participants wisely. You recruit them. Often we have to go very wide to recruit because unless we are told, I have a group and oh wow, I have a WhatsApp chat group of PhD research candidates. So if you're doing research on doctoral experience, I've got a group that you can send it to that fits your target. But that doesn't happen very often. So you have to go to different Facebook groups, social media groups, you have to go to different organizations, and you have to say, hey, I'm doing this, I'm running these focus group discussions. This is the type of participant that I need. Do you fit this category? If yes, please join us. So be careful about that. Note that sometimes when you try to get participants, you're always going to come across gatekeepers. So, people like me who can help you or can put up a roadblock or stop you from getting access to certain people. Say, for example, I want to do research in a hospital and I want to talk with patients about their experience of being a patient, for example. The gatekeepers are going to be the doctors, the nurses, and the hospital administration. I'm working with a doctoral candidate at the moment who is doing research on innovative teaching methods for primary school children. Her gatekeepers are the Ministry of Education, school principals, then classroom teachers, and finally the parents of the children involved. So 4 different categories of gatekeepers that she's got to get through in order to spend time with the children and talk with the children about how they learn. So you not only do you have the possibility that gatekeepers exist, you have also got to make sure that you have a strategy to inform them well, address all their questions, build rapport, and get their buy-in. I get them saying, yeah, we like this. Let me help you arrange this so that your research can be successful. Now, to run a focus group, you are advised that a acceptable size of participants or acceptable number of participants is somewhere between 5 to 10 people per group. Actually, I put 6 to 8 preferred. 6 to 8, 5 to 8 even, 5 to 8, 6 to 8 is the best number because with a reasonable amount of people, i.e. 6 to 8, you can get a good discussion going. You get a discussion that sort of starts to take a life of its own. It also means that within, say, a 60 to 90-minute period, 1 to 1.5 hours, everybody gets the opportunity to speak, to share. You get time to build a little bit of rapport. You get time to get through the types of issues, the types of discussion points that you have. When you kind of get towards 10 people, although it might seem easier, the more people in the room, the easier it is for me. At least if somebody doesn't talk, someone else is. The people, you're either ending up with so many people that it becomes difficult to manage the session. It becomes difficult to give everybody an opportunity to speak. And you've got to remember in groups, there'll always be 1 or 2 people who like to have their voice heard. So they will speak more than everybody else. I think I'm one of those people. You're always going to have someone who wants to dominate the conversation. As you get beyond 10 people, you're not giving everybody the chance. More people will let the dominant person talk and just say, let them speak. It's okay. I'm getting my free lunch. I don't care. And you're also making it difficult for yourself to navigate and to effectively control the group dynamics. With a small group of 6 to 8, you've got that chance. Now, if I go under 5, say, for example, I do a focus group with 3 people, I might as well have done it as an interview because 3 people are not really going to bounce off each other. It's going to be hard to get a sustained conversation with multiple viewpoints. And that's what we want. A focus group discussion is that bouncing off as different people contribute, but it's also making sure that there is a chance for differing viewpoints to be heard, to be expressed, to be discussed. And if you've only got 2 or 3 people in your focus group, you're not really getting enough, and it will become a very short focus group because a couple of people will say their thing and the conversation will die. But a few more people, the conversation comes to life. You want to think about the similar types of people, and this is not just people who are qualified to answer and address the questions, okay? This also relates to the fact that you want people who are going to get along in the group. You don't want to have such a diversity of personalities that you know they're going to fight with each other. You don't want people who are going to have very strong opposing radical type opinions that it's going to cause a punch up in your focus group. And yes, that does happen, okay? So think about the people. Are they going to get along? Are they going to be respectful of each other? For example, if I brought a homeless person in to a focus group with mostly employed, educated, privileged people, that's not going to work well. I'm better off doing 2 focus groups, one with homeless people and those from underprivileged socioeconomic backgrounds. Sorry, I just have to mute that person. Um, and then one with the more privileged so that they're going to get along. Now, I know this introduces a little bit of bias in a way, but it also means it makes your job easier to get the information, to get the data. And then as you're doing your data analysis, you're able to construct a narrative that juxtaposes the 2 different groups and what they experience. You also have to think about whether there'll be repeated groups. And what I mean by the idea or by the concept of repeated groups is, look, sometimes we're going to do one focus group a month for 3 months. And what that means is the same people need to come back. So when you're looking at your participants, you've got to be open to them about what participation, what contribution are they expected to have through this process. So if we're doing a focus group and I'm doing a focus group once a month for 3 months, when you recruit your participant, you've also got to make it very transparent, very clear to them. Hey, there are 3 focus groups. Your participation in all 3 is what is needed here. And get their willingness, get their buy-in to make sure that they will participate in all 3. Next, let's talk about environment. So we've started with people and what people need to be in order to make the focus group work. But the next one is environment itself. So how do I set up the room, the space, to make sure it's comfortable? So that's the first one. You want to make a focus group space comfortable. About fitting, people have comfortable chairs. They don't feel restricted. They don't feel, oh, I hate sitting in this horrible seat for so long. It's making my butt feel itchy. Little things like that are very important. So if, for example, you decided to do the focus group at your university, a lecture theatre is a very uncomfortable environment. Hard seating, no sofas, dark lighting, all sorts of things like that aren't really good. So choose an environment that's going to be relaxing. You want to put people at ease. You want to make people feel happy to be there. If I'm sitting down and I'm like, oh, I hate this chair, again, I'm more likely to want to leave the focus group discussion, which means you lose data. Think about circle seating. Now, this is actually, you want to be in a situation where everybody can see everybody. So round tables are nice. Not everybody wants tables. Some people want the seat only. If you put a table in the way, that actually limits your observation of body language. So you've got to decide, as the researcher, not only are you listening, but you're also watching your participants. So do you need to see all of their body language? If yes, circular seating. Whatever you do, don't do rows. It's not primary school. It's not an exam. It's got to be something where people can naturally have a conversation. Personally, I like a few sofas and a little coffee table with tea and coffee in that, because people can gravitate to the type of seat they like, i.e. comfort. They're facing each other. They can see everybody who's contributing. Great thing. We have to think about how we're recording this. Are you doing a sound recording only? Are you doing a video recording? If you're doing a sound recording, um, you know, one or two devices. If you're doing a video recording, one or two devices. I made the mistake a couple of years ago. It wasn't a focus group, but we can learn from this mistake. I did a recording with an academic friend. She's a vice provost of a university, and we did a fantastic interview session, discussion session on supervising doctoral students. And we set it up so that we had a video, and the video was sort of from the phone, not a bad quality phone, but was about 2 meters away. And then just to make sure I captured the sound properly, I had my phone directly between the two of us, recording sound only. Well, the video looked beautiful, but I couldn't hear anything. And my phone broke, so I lost the sound and I lost the whole interview. Now, when we're recording here in a focus group, we've got to make sure that we have enough backup plans so that it's going to give us our data. If we're recording through video, perhaps two cameras, two phones set up on tripods. Do it in such a way that you always have a backup plan, because if, like me, something went wrong, that's a problem. So it's not only how many devices we are using, okay? It's also where are we setting them up, and is that going to work so that we can capture the sound and so forth. And a final consideration for environment is maybe we want to do it online. We can do a focus group right now. The problem with online is the moment I turn my camera off, you either get that ugly photograph of me or you get a black box. I'm not getting that personal interaction that I get face to face. The second part is you see me in a little black box in the corner of my screen, most likely. You don't see a lot of my full body language. You might see my facial expressions. Yeah, you'll see my hands, but you don't see the rest of my body language. You don't see, like at the moment when I'm flipping you the bird but smiling at you, you don't see that. So you don't see when there's a disconnect between subtle body language and the words that are being spoken. Now, this is an important one because even though the focus group is about listening to the stories, it is also an element of observational research. We want to triangulate the spoken word with the physical appearance, behaviors, actions of the different people. So when we do something online, we actually cut out some of the data. The advantage with online, well, we get a video recording, we get a sound recording, we might even get captions. So, quite a lot of the transcription can be done for us, but we lose some of the facets. Plus, even though online is meant to be a nice, smooth conversation, we always have those little lags while somebody's turning on their microphone and, can you hear me? I'm speaking now. Can you hear me? All of those little things that happen, right? You're familiar with that. Um, that disrupts the flow. And it's very difficult for two or three people to speak in close proximity to each other on an online environment. But in a face-to-face discussion, as I'm talking, you might say, but hey, Craig, I want to add a comment before you move on. That's easy to do face-to-face. It's very difficult to do in an online scenario. Now let's talk about the moderator. And I use the word moderator rather than researcher. You are the researcher. You may or may not be the person running the focus group. The moderator is simply the person who facilitates the focus group. If you are not good with people, get a research assistant to be the moderator. Train them with what you need. Get somebody who's experienced in running a focus group to run the focus group. Yes, you will be there. Yes, you will still do the data analysis. You will do the transcription. You will do the coding. But you might not be the person running the actual group. So, for example, you might be a little bit introvert. You might feel that you don't have the interpersonal communication skills to run a group of 6 people and really hold it together. And you might say, hey, Craig, I know you understand this subject. This is my goals. Can you moderate a focus group for me? Sure, I'll do that. But you're still part of everything that goes on. I'm just the one who leads the discussion. So I want to emphasize for you, as a researcher, you're involved in every step, in the development of every step and in the processes. But you do not have to be the person running the focus group. But you have to train that person. You have to guide that person. So think about your own skills. Be honest with yourself. There is no point being a moderator of a focus group if you hate talking to people. And to be honest, if you hate talking to people, probably you should be doing quantitative-based research anyway. But, if you are scared of talking in front of small groups, if you don't have strong conversational skills, then either you learn to develop those skills to better yourself, which is personally my recommendation, or you bring someone in to do that. Now, a moderator needs to be skillful in group discussions. Sometimes there isn't a discussion. So imagine those of you who have come to my sessions before, at the end when I do a Q&A session, sometimes nobody has a question. Nobody, turns on their camera and says, hi, Craig, I want to talk about this. Sometimes it's just dead silence. So you're doing a focus group, you're moderating a focus group on your research topic, and nobody wants to talk. Just silence like that. It's nasty. So you've got to have the ability to talk a little bit more. This is where, I have improved over my years, and teaching helped, because with teaching, you learn to talk more. So in a situation like that, yeah, I just tell a story and then I try to get somebody to be more involved, and hopefully somebody else will do it. Or if you're teaching an undergraduate class, it'll be like, okay, so what's your opinion? And you sit there until somebody says it. We've got to be able to lead and grow a discussion. We have predetermined questions, and I don't like always the word questions. We have themes, we have topics, we have things we must understand. Even though we like to follow a set of questions, realize that those are flexible. The coverage of the topic is not flexible. You must cover each topic, but the words that you choose to ask each question, that may change a little bit. Ultimately, the goal of the moderator is to create a permissive environment. And to use modern terms, I call that a safe space. Ultimately, it's creating an environment in which everybody feels comfortable to make a contribution. That's what needs to be done. Now we move to post focus group, i.e. analysis and reporting. What do we do after the focus group is there? We've done the focus group. Now, how do I turn that data into actual research? How do I turn it into what I'm going to use it for? Now, actually, that's systematic analysis and coding. So first up is transcription, accurate transcription of every single thing that was done. Then the analysis of that in terms of how am I going to go through it? How am I going to code this? How am I going to identify the key words, the key topics, the key themes? Do I have a predetermined coding system, or am I basing that upon my experience of listening to the focus group? That's something you've got to think through. Now, when I put here, we have predetermined questions, we have themes. Sometimes those themes become an initial coding practice for us. So those themes we kind of want to highlight. We recognize anytime somebody talks about it, and then we might actually delve deeper and code or deconstruct a little bit deeper from that. Okay. We need to think about that before the focus group. Don't just go run a focus group and say, how the hell do I analyze all of this? That's a lot of people speaking. You've actually got to think about how that's going to work. Now, again, if you remember back here, I said 6 to 8 people preferred. If you go above 10 people, a lot of work, right? When I come into both the transcription and the coding and the analysis part of what I'm doing, the more people in my focus group, the harder that becomes, because I've got more people talking about the same thing. I've got people switching between themes. I've got extra work that has to be done. So part of the preparing for the analysis is actually thinking through, 6 people is an excellent number, because that's going to make my analysis less stressful for me. You can do 10 focus groups, each with 6 people. It's still easier work than if you do 6 focus groups, each with 10 people, because the thinking processes and the extracting and the identifying how different segments of conversation relate to each theme that you're using is more difficult with larger numbers. So think it through, plan it carefully. There are actually 2 things that you want to plan for. One, you want, what data do I really need? That's the first thing, what I talked about before. But the second thing you want to plan for is, how do I make my own workload smooth? Because if the analysis section, the analysis component of your research is a lot of hard work, it's not going to be ideal for you. So plan for that as well. Plan to make it work for you and give you the data that you need. And then everything else will fall into place. Now, when we come to reporting, we want to focus on verifiable procedures. This means as you're writing your chapter 3, so when you do your proposal, you'll sort of like, I'm going to do a focus group. We're going to have blah, 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 blah. After you've done it, you're going to update that section for your chapter 3, because you're going to say a focus group was run. We had 7 participants. The participants had these demographic characteristics. Filter questions were asked in advance, blah, blah, blah. When the focus group was started with an introduction, you're actually showcasing the base procedures that you use. So I can run the same focus group style as you. And that includes a list about the themes that you used, okay? And then the final one is appropriate reporting. And this is the ethical side. It's treating the respondents, treating your participants' words with respect. It's giving them full sentences, not taking phrases out only and misconstruing their purpose. But it is it is treating everything with respect. And it's reporting accurately that responses to certain questions were responses on a particular theme only, not trying to sort of suggest that they belong somewhere else. Now, at the end of the day, as your supervisor, as your examiner, I don't know if you are doing this. I don't know how ethical you are. What I choose to believe is that you are researching ethically and you are being honest so that none of those things are happening. None of those misappropriation of quotations are happening. That you are saying the full, you're using the full sentence, you're attributing it to the right theme and so forth. I have to believe, and I want to believe, that you are doing it in that particular way. So that sort of takes us through what we have to deal with afterwards. And the reporting is simply writing it up in your dissertation. So your chapter 4 and how that then transitions and metamorphoses into chapter 5, your conclusions, if you're using the 5-chapter model. So what we have to think about from a focus group is, how do I plan it? How do I execute it? And then how do I use the data ethically afterwards? Those are the 3 big elements. Now, let's move into a discussion on questions and eliciting participation. Now, that eliciting participation isn't so much recruiting, but it's about strategies to get participants to contribute to the discussion. If you teach, if any of us here in this room tonight teach, you'll understand how difficult it is to get someone to talk when they don't want to talk. That happens in a classroom situation so often, especially earlier on in a semester, in a course. And you have to consider the focus group to have some strong similarities to this. People need to warm up to you. People need to feel comfortable with others. So what's often quite good, before I get into the real strategies, is before you even start the focus group, have a little bit of networking, get to know each other time over coffee. So, everybody turns up at 10 a.m. You have 15, 20 minutes for everybody just to chit chat with each other, and you go around and introduce yourself, and you have a little bit of a chit chat with every single person before you start, maybe at 10:15, 10:20, before you start the actual focus group. A focus group can give us really fantastic, rich data. But you've got to remember that it is about human communication, interpersonal communication. And as such, we need to have that time to build up, to try and get things going with people first in order for it to be successful. So let's move on. The moderator is obviously going to be a key here. And this is about the skills that a good moderator should have. So although it's not a skill, the key thing is select the right moderator. So if you acknowledge that you are not the best person for this, then you've got to be able to think about what who is going to be the best person to make sure you get the data. You can consider using an assistant moderator. And what this is somebody who comes along and helps you. They may not run the conversation, but they're there making sure the technology works, that the recordings are there, that the batteries are not going flat, that things are handed out to your participants if you have, papers or artifacts that you want to share with them. They're there to note on body language and so forth. As a moderator, you need to be very mentally prepared. And this is not just, I know what my topic and what my themes are. You have to be prepared for something to go wrong. You have to be prepared for a radical answer or response from a participant. So the mental preparation is, look, all the things that should happen, all the things that I need, and staying alert to making sure you're ticking those off your box, but also what could go wrong? What happens if I have a group of people who don't get along, who are all introverts, who are all silent, who only want to give short yes, no, 2, 3 word answers and not go deeper? How do I cope with that? And you have to prepare yourself. You need to be good at using purposeful small talk. That's about telling little stories to try and get people warmed up, to get people willing to talk to you. You need to be able to make a smooth and a snappy introduction. Now, here's the challenge. In building rapport with people, we often sort of spend a little bit longer talking to them. But we don't want the introduction to the purpose of the focus group and how the focus group will run. We don't want that to be too long because people will switch off and they won't be there. So you got to sort of, you have your little bit of networking, you get started, you get into it, and then you want to hear their voices, not wanting to hear your own. You need to be able to use communication tools like pauses and also things like probes where, oh, why do you see it that way? Has that influenced you in other ways? It's just being able to do things to create a little bit of drama, to create a little bit of invitation, but also to create an opportunity where people can voice out and speak. We need to record the discussion. Now, let's assume that we are not using technology. And in fact, the recording of our discussion is going to be, oops, just give me a moment, through something like this, pen and paper, notebook. How do I go about if I'm doing a manual recording using pen and paper? How do I go about reporting what I did? Now, a piece of research I got inadvertently involved in many, many years ago, early on in my career, was actually unexpected, but it resulted in us creating a research plan. So I had a head of department at a university that I was teaching at. I had a head of department that I didn't like. I don't think she liked me either very much, although she did hire me. But we had a bit of conflict. And it was the annual review time, where your boss comes around and watches you teaching and all of that sort of stuff. So she came into my classroom and she sat there for an hour. In a 2-hour lecture, she sat there for an hour. Now, the classrooms at this university, it was quite a modern university at its time. The classrooms were not set up as lecture theatres. They were set up as almost like mini boardrooms. So we had 4 huge round tables, each with about 10 students around them. And my head of department, Catherine, came in. I knew she was coming in. I wasn't fazed by her coming in, but she spent her whole time drawing. So you're there teaching students, and your boss is drawing pictures while she's meant to be evaluating your teaching. Well, it turned out she was doing something that later turned into some research for us. And it was very interesting because what she did was she mapped out the communication patterns between myself and the 4 tables and between the 4 tables. Who was talking to whom and what was the frequency of it? So her recording of a focus group almost was actually a map rather than the words that were being said. She was more interested in who was communicating with whom and at what frequency, i.e., how often were they communicating. And that gave us some interesting research about the different ways that lecturers actually facilitate discussions within classrooms. Now, this is where having an assistant moderator comes in, because the primary purpose of the focus group is actually the words themselves, the stories being told, the opinions being offered. But a secondary element is actually the interrelationships. And one person can be noting down key things, key statements, key themes, key ideas that were expressed. The other can be noting down the patterns of communication that happen. And that's why I say the body language, watching what happens outside of the word, that can actually contribute to our research. So as you're recording the discussion, if you're doing it manually, what are you recording? Are you recording the spoken word? Are you recording patterns? Are you recording body language? Or are you recording all 3? A moderator also needs to be able to control reaction to participants. And this one is really a challenge, because what happens when you get somebody who says something really controversial within a focus group? And something controversial, I'm not even going to give an example, but you can imagine somebody saying something offensive, or somebody saying something that is contrary to typical social beliefs, for example. I'll give an example. Girls should be able to have children at 12 years old. Now, most societies, that's not considered quite acceptable. Now, your reaction as the moderator can't be, oh, you can't say that. You can't, you can't overreact. You can't be too judgmental in your visual or auditory, either your spoken or your body language. You can't be too judgmental in your own reactions because that's going to shift again the dynamics of the group, both that person's ongoing discussion with you, but also how other people see it. If you're seen as disagreeing with somebody quite uh, obviously, or you're seen as being in shock quite obviously from someone, other people might be, maybe I'm not going to say what I think because Craig's not going to like that comment, so I better shut up. So you've got to be very neutral in both your judgment and your praise of everybody's statements. And remember, it's a safe space. Your job is to make everybody feel comfortable. Your job is actually to make everybody talk. So you want to get the opinions, but you don't want to guide them. And that's sort of using subtle group controls as well. You've got to have techniques to make sure that the groups are coming together well. You've got to find ways to evolve the conversation. So somebody says something like that statement, I might say, well, I think that statement's outside of what our purpose of the discussion is today. Let's move on to talking about um, a different theme. It's being able to keep the discussion alive, but also making sure that it still remains comfortable and safe for you. And a final useful skill is having that appropriate conclusion, being able to wrap up. And I'll give some examples very shortly about that. Let's move to the next slide. So here's an outline, and this is how we can do a snappy introduction. So I use this as an outline for you to think about what you can do. So here we go. You're all my participants. I've got a very large focus group of 16 people, but I'm going to survive. Welcome. My name is Craig. My assistant over here is Mr. T, and together we're going to be running the session. Our topic today is about marriage and people's first marriages. The results are going to be used for the design of new marriage programs to help newlywed couples succeed and have long marriages. You were selected because you have recently married within the last 12 months, and you're under 24 years of age, and of course, over 18 years of age as well. Some guidelines for our discussion today. There's no right or wrong answers, only differing points of view. Feel free to say what you want to say, but recognize that other people may not always agree with you. We are recording this session, so please just speak one person at a time. No yelling like we're at a football stadium. We're on a first name basis. We've all agreed to use pseudonyms today, so please call each other by the name on your name badge. We don't have to agree with each other's, but we do need to listen respectfully. I would ask that you please turn your mobile phones off for the duration of this, or at least put them on silent. If you do need to make an urgent call, please do step out of the room for a couple of minutes to do that, and then come back and rejoin the conversation. My role today is to guide the discussion. I won't be asking a lot of questions, but I will be pushing us towards a few key themes. I really want and hope that you will actually talk to each other. So let's start. What was the first thing that caused you concern in your marriage? Okay, so that's an introduction. It's pretty fast. There's still quite a few things we have to put in there, right? But I didn't want to drag it too long. I wanted to set rules. and I wanted to get straight into the discussion. Now, this is, excuse me for a second. This is an outline for you to use. If you're running a focus group, this is what you need to set yourself up with. Print it out, have it there, and just as I did, adapt it quickly as you're going live. Now we talk about, oops, sorry. Oh, I went one page too far. Oops. All right. Now I talk about the role of the recorder, or really it's actually the assistant moderator. So I personally think it's a good idea to have someone else in the room with you. I think about this for two reasons. One, for everything that I talk about here. Two, for safety. No matter what situation you are in, even sometimes if you're recording, but especially if you are not doing a video recording, there's always a chance that somebody will make accusations of inappropriate behavior. My solution to that is having an additional person in the room that can witness everything that happens. That one is important, but the real role of the assistant moderator is helping with equipment, refreshments, helping you to arrange the room, helping you to welcome participants and just sort of get everybody chit-chatting. They sit in a designated location, so they'll be part of the circle, they'll be part of the group, but they'll sort of be a little bit distant from that, or they may be just outside of that group. Their job is very much to take notes. Even if you are recording, you're doing video, you're doing sound recordings, their job is still to take notes because they're going to be focusing on watching people. You're focusing on leading a discussion. They're going to focus on watching people. Now, remember I said before, you don't have to be the moderator. If you choose to get somebody else to moderate for you because they have better interpersonal skills, you then should take the role or assume the role of assistant moderator because you're still in the room, you're still part of the process, and you're still actively collecting data. Okay, they're also going to operate the recording equipment. Generally speaking, they will not participate in the discussion. They're not the target audience. They're there to help you. But they may ask questions if they're invited to. Maybe they've noticed something that you haven't. And they say, I just want to clarify. I want to ask a little bit deeper. So that might be something that they do. They may also give an oral summary. So they may do a wrap up for you rather than you do a wrap up. And sometimes it's nice to have somebody who wasn't part of the discussion, who wasn't an active part of the discussion, to actually give that wrap up for everybody. They also debrief with the moderator. So after the focus group has happened, they will sit with you, or you will sit with the moderator and debrief. They'll talk about what they noticed, the notes that they took, and how that correlates to different things. They'll give opinions on the personalities, the people, the authenticity of the statements. They're there to help enrich your research, and they give an extra set of eyes on what you are doing. And finally, they're also there to give feedback on analysis and reports. So as you're analyzing, maybe you're going through the coding, you're putting the different elements of the voice, the transcripts into the different code categories that you've got, you're going to want to ask them to look at it and say, is this how you see it as well? Again, it's a second set of eyes that just helps make things smooth. All right, let's move on asking questions that yield powerful information. At the end of the day, we want data. That's our whole goal. So in order to get data, we have to use open-ended questions. We want to avoid the use of dichotomous questions. Do not ask a question that the only answer is going to be yes or no. Are you happy with the current state of American politics? No. That's not a good question because you've now got to extrapolate from that. What do you dislike about current American politics? Oh, well, first of all, let's talk about the fact that they're cutting research funding to universities and putting lives at risk. You see the difference in the length of question, the amount of data, the detail that you're getting. So it is important that you have very open-ended questions, that you ask questions in such a way that almost force, but certainly encourage people to give longer answers. That's the key thing. We don't use the word, or we don't ask the question why too much. You have to get people to really strongly elaborate. Okay, that's important. Why is a very simple question. You have to give bigger, better, stronger parameters to that. A good idea is to use what I call think back questions. And a think back question asks you to review a moment in time. How did you react? How did you feel about a situation? What did that scenario mean for you? Did that scenario change your life, and how did it change your life? A think back question gets people to talk about their own experience, but it gives a context. It gives a set of specific parameters to that. So think back to your final day at high school. What were the emotions that you were feeling when you realized that I never have to come back here again, but a different phase of my life has started? Now, that's a question that gives people a very specific time period, not month, year, but it's a day in their life. And it enables them to actually talk about it. You can't answer that with, it was a bad day. Naturally, you're going to feel like you're going to add more to the conversation, and it becomes a very good starting point. When you're asking questions, use different types of questions. Don't just have, it's not a survey. It's not a questionnaire. You don't have parallel questions that just sort of generate simple answers. You need to vary questions. You need opinion, you need fact, you need future thinking, all sorts of stuff like that. You want questions that get participants involved, so you need them to talk. At the same time, though, it becomes important for you to focus the questions. You've really got to narrow those questions down so that you're getting the data that you want. If you're not getting the data that you want from the focus group questions, you're asking the wrong questions. Now, in the spirit of that, it's always a good idea to do a pilot focus group first, just to get some feedback on how you are asking the questions, whether they are giving you the data that you need, or how you can improve the design of the questions. Now, a pilot focus group doesn't need 6 to 8 people. A pilot focus group can be 3 to 4 people because you're getting a little bit of commentary on the questions that you've got. Also be cautious about serendipitous questions, questions that sort of seem like they fit and give the perfect answer, but make sure you're getting the detail that you need in order to actually address everything. Now we have to think about ending questions. So as we're trying to wrap up what we're doing, an ending question becomes something like, and all things considered. All things considered are, look, we know what the state of the world is, everything that we know what's happening. How do you feel this will impact your life? It's kind of broad, but at the end of the day, it gives people an opportunity to wrap up. It gives people almost a final word on the topics of discussion. Think about a summary question. Maybe you can summarize what are three key things you want me to know about this topic. You know, you can let people sort of summarize for themselves and then just go around the room, let everybody give you their three key things. Or you might just simply do it. My final question is, and ask away. That's also acceptable. Just work out what is going to work for you. Whatever you do, you have to draw the focus group to a conclusion. So it becomes your responsibility to find a way to end the discussion and move on to maybe a little bit of social networking or to everybody leaving the room. But you've got to put an end, and that usually becomes, look, we've had a fantastic discussion today. I want to thank you for your very insightful input. Uh, I have one final question to ask. What's one thing you need me to hear? It's fine. Let everybody talk and then say thank you very much, goodbye. You need to put that into the conversation. Now, the final slide that I've got is on strategies for focus group questions. There's actually a lot of different ways we can create a question. It's not just, what do you think about this? In your experience, has this been? You can actually do it like a questionnaire. You can have alternatives. So you might have a flip chart with some possible answers, and you might say, okay, I'm going to ask a question. These are the possible answers. How do you resonate? Which answer resonates most with you? And why, from your experience, does it resonate so much? You may have a list of different things. You might ask people to fill in a blank. So you might have a sentence with a blank word and say, look, when I'm thinking about this product or when I'm thinking about this concept, what word do you put into that word? Now, that's going to work really well if you're working with kids. But it also is fantastic for it's fantastic for working with adults as well. You might have what's called rate with a blank card. So I might have some blank cards, and my assistant moderator gives you all a card and gives everybody a pen and say, all right, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel about this statement that I'm going to make? Blah, blah, blah. Statement, they write it down, they hold it up. Okay, so Fred, you gave that a 3 out of 5. What, what are you thinking about when you give the 3? So you're getting people to make a statement, i.e., a quantitative answer, and then you're getting them to explain it. You might actually want to use some sort of scale, sliding scale approach where, you know, you can sort of get people to physically move objects, i.e., a scale, but they can physically move things or interact with objects to showcase their position. Maybe you're going to say, look, on the right-hand side of the room are going to be people who support this. On the left-hand side of the room are going to be people who don't support it. Can you stand somewhere in the room based on how you feel about the topic? So you'll get some people who are extreme, you'll get some people who are moderate, somewhere in the middle, a little bit left or right of center. Um, you can actually use physical space. A focus group isn't limited to us sitting in a circle. A focus group is how we can also use the full environment to actually address questions and facilitate conversations. It also means it's easy for other people to see where they stand in relation to you and vice versa. We can use questions that focus on projection, fantasy, sorry, that should be a Y, projection, fantasy, and daydreams. And that's about thinking towards the future. What's the best case scenario? For you, can you describe what the ultimate end goal would be, or the ultimate lifestyle would be, or something like that? I can ask people to draw a picture. Yes, this is also part of focus group. It's not always the answering of questions and the discussion. Sometimes you might want to get people to draw a picture. To me, drawing a picture can hold two roles. One, you do it very early on, so it stimulates discussion, and you use those pictures as discussion points to evolve the conversation. Or you do it towards the end as a wrap-up exercise. The challenge with pictures, though, if you do it early on, everybody is doing the analysis for you. If you do it later on, you're the one who has to find an analysis protocol for the pictures and the meaning within that. You might want to get the focus group to work together to develop a campaign. For example, okay, we have this challenge. How can you collectively solve it? And you stick out of that. They work together like group work, an undergraduate almost, but they work together in solving the problem and trying to create a solution or a campaign, as we would call it in this context, but giving answers. And then you talk about the answers and you let that evolve. So it becomes like a group project. It's a different form of focus group, but it's equally as viable. There could be role playing. You might ask a couple of the participants to role play or be different from what their normal characters are. And then other people can comment on what they see, what they observe, how they feel about that. Whatever you do, the important strategy that you have to have is developing questions that foster ownership. You want ownership of opinion. That is the most important thing out of the whole experience.